coming up this week?
I know for me, if I show up and it's down, unless I'm at zero, I'm just going to find the next one, right? You might not be getting that information. If you don't have that technology to come in and alert you proactively to say, hey, the charger's down for X reason, then you assume it's up, right? And you just assume that nobody's interfacing with it. I'm not necessarily, scanning the barcode, calling the number, sending the text, and opening up a ticket to say, hey, something's wrong with this. So you inadvertently end up with a situation where now you've got an uptime situation, but also a reputation situation.
Oh, sure.
And a revenue situation, because you didn't even know it was down. You just thought you weren't collecting revenue. The fact is people are driving by it, realizing, oh, it's not working, and off I go.
Yeah. Well, hello, friends, and welcome to the EV Resource Podcast. I'm Zach Hurst, and each week I bring you the latest EV news, information, and interviews with industry experts. And this week I have Alex Aguero from Sitetracker, and we're going to talk about some of the technologies that are involved with building out EV infrastructure and supporting really one of the biggest transitions when it comes to technology that we'll see in our lifetime. So, Alex, I want to thank you so much for joining me.
No, thanks for having me, Zach. I really appreciate it.
So I like to give my guests the opportunity to introduce themselves before we really dive into the meat of the discussion, primarily because the audience deserves to know who they're watching or listening to, but also because I don't want to just leave your story to what somebody could Google, right? So I want to give you the opportunity to share your origin story, if you will.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So as you mentioned, I'm here, on behalf of Sitetracker. I'm the Senior Director of Customer Success. I'm a founding member of the company. I was employee 8. We're now at 400. I've been working for Sitetracker for the last 9 years, focused on our customer experience across the board. Over the last 1.5 years, I've taken over global responsibility over our energy vertical. So proud to say we're making a ton of inroads on that and becoming a market leader for the deployments of those assets. But what that includes is your traditional renewable energy utilities, and within that is electric vehicle charging. So doing that across the globe has been pretty exciting over the course of the last 1.5 years.
I actually want to take things before Sitetracker. What were you involved in, or what's somewhat of your background?
Yeah, so my background was not in renewable space. So I am a born and raised New Jerseyer, got recruited out of college, going to prime New Jersey company. It was a medical device company focused more on IT and PMO. I was part of an executive leadership program there and was able to climb the ranks pretty quickly. And what was a great experience was the founder of Sitetracker decided to go start a small startup company out of his basement in New Jersey. As that began to progress, he knew me from my time at that company and tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, let's go 100 miles an hour and go try to build a beast. And here we are. So 400 folks later, give or take, we've really been able to break through into the world of critical infrastructure and focus primarily on deployment operations management and providing, full asset lifecycle, from initial sale. Once that gets locked and loaded, we're going into site selection through construction, whether that's self-serve or you're subbing that out to a third-party contractor, all the way through the operations and maintenance of your assets. And we've really seen a lot of success in the critical infrastructure here in North America and have taken it globally.
So I have had guests on quite a bit, actually, especially in the last, I want to say 6 months or so, talking about technology related to EV charging. And one of the reasons that I have tried to focus on that is much more than just that's the opportunities that have come. But what I like about what you just said is that from a technology standpoint, what we're going to be talking about is very different from a lot of the other conversations that I've been able to share with the EV resource audience related to EV charging and technology. So while the overarching topic is still somewhat the same, I know that we're going to dive into some things that are very, very different than what I've discussed previously. So maybe that's a little disclaimer to people to hey, don't worry, we're getting into some cool stuff. Stick around. Don't go anywhere. Don't turn it off. As I understand it, one of the things that you all are working with that really kind of sets you apart is working with AI and the application of AI in a way. And so I want to talk generally about how AI might be influencing and impacting the industry, but then also get into some specifics of how it's being applied.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, as we all know, the EV market is facing, a volume challenge. It's facing a time-bound challenge. We need to build out the infrastructure. We need to go out and do it very quickly. So we need to make those decisions quickly. The other part is from the other side is we're dealing with an uptime challenge, right? And just a consumer type of reputation, if you will, that's going to be driving ultimately the use of this infrastructure. So with that said, kind of going back to your question on AI and predictive analytics and making sure that we're making the right decisions. I can't stress enough how important it is for a CPO or a construction company to really understand what the implications are of the work that they're going to accomplish before they start doing that work. So we're thinking site selection. Step one is what are we doing? Well, are we taking in and ingesting all of the data that's available to us to understand traffic patterns, to understand just general proximity to retail locations that are going to make your charger profitable. What does the grid look like there? That's a big portion of it, right? We're going to need grid mods to go in and be able to put our charge points in the ground, and making sure that we are ingesting that data and using AI and using predictive analytics to ultimately help us make those decisions, make them faster, is paramount to being successful for any CPO at the end of the day. And that is something that we're seeing all the time. And that's just site selection, right? Step one of it all.
Right.
As we continue going down that life cycle, if you will, I almost see it as not making sure that we're selecting the right site, more so make sure that we're not selecting the wrong site. That's a big portion. Is once you start attempting to go get the permitting, utility, the interconnection permits, all of that, that's what really extends that timeline. Mm-hmm. And it's costly. Every day that you don't have the charge point up and running is the day that you're not collecting revenue. So it's one of those things that is paramount to becoming successful for anybody looking to get in the space.
Yeah, and there are a number of startups and companies that are recognizing finally the opportunity related to providing the source of fuel for these vehicles. It is quite remarkable that just generally you don't. I mean, yes, we do see some of the oil-backed companies. Shell is one that comes to mind frequently, or BP with BP Pulse. But there are so many other small, even local or regional CPOs that aren't looking to be the dominant force in the space. And I think that is an opportunity, but also presents a lot of challenges because, to your point, you have to really be able to pivot quickly and go, all right, even site selection. Well, the changes that are going on at or around a particular site, that it might be different, or maybe there's a new apartment building down the street, or God forbid, maybe you've already committed to a site and then a competitor who can move faster now goes in across the street, and you're going, what like the big boys, they can kind of work with that. I mean, clearly the biggest names have been operating really struggling because of site selection, among other things, for so long, but they had the revenue. I mean, Electrify America started with $2 billion. Okay, you can afford the time it takes to catch up. Where a lot of smaller networks might be razor thin margins, and like a matter of weeks can really affect their success. So timing, having the ability to get that information very quickly is of paramount importance.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And At Sitetracker, we're approaching 100 total EV customers globally, and that's across traditional CPOs, large CPOs like EVgo, the smaller, more regional CPOs, but also pure EPCs that are just there managing the construction,
Yeah.
all the way through O&M partners, and it does that, within fleets as well. So with that said, those regional CPOs that you just mentioned, one of the things that we focus on is to ensure that you are condensing that timeline as much as you possibly can. So there's a component as a startup where you're running a mile a minute because you have to. You've got the
Yes.
backing. You got to try to get market share. You're going to go out and you're going to deploy, your assets. But then, what's your reputation really look like if you don't have the uptime? So that's another component to it.
Yes.
But as we do that, and we think about technology, how technology plays a role in all of this, is as I mentioned, every day that you're not up and running is a day that you're not collecting, but every day that extends the project or the initial deployment is the day that your customer is asking how come, what happened, right? And there are a ton of things out of the control. I've mentioned utilities a bunch of times, but there's departments of transportation, there's municipalities, there are people that don't necessarily want an EV charger within their apartment complex. Those are all factors that are going to play into this. So how we can shrink some of those is by truly focusing on what each individual company can control, which is how quickly are you getting, your bill of materials over and approved into procurement, placing your order, making sure that your equipment gets on site on time for the crew that has been mobilized that same day. If you get equipment there the day the crew mobilizes, that's beautiful. If you mobilize your crew and equipment is delayed and all of a sudden you can't start your construction work for 2 days, well, now you have a little bit of you're taking hits from a cost standpoint, but also from a customer reliability standpoint. And that's what we focus on at Sitetracker, is making sure that you've got the reporting, you've got the information to make those decisions and make them quickly, which isn't just about getting charge points in the ground, but what is that brand that you're building to ultimately be more competitive in your bids, earn the reputation for folks to want to work with you, and ultimately continue to scale and grow the business. Because as a regional CPO, you have boots on the ground. You can move pretty quick. As you're trying to grow outside of that region, that those boots on the grounds become a lot more scarce.
Yep.
So you need to run tighter. You need to have a process that you can scale with, and that's something that we put a big focus on here at Sitetracker and discussing with our customers to ensure that smooth project execution from site selection through O&M and that uptime is providing the right experience and giving you the right brand recognition that you need at the end of the day as a smaller, potentially more regional CPO.
Yeah. Well, especially if you're an unknown entity, right?
Yeah.
Where you're just getting started. And in a way, being all talk, like there is a point where that is, before you have your first charger installed, you're just talking. Like
You're promising.
nobody really knows who you are, how you're going to run things. You had mentioned a delay of the equipment being on site, but there's frustrations on the flip side of that too, where if the equipment's on site for many, many months, but you're waiting for utility connections or transformers, because of course they're in short supply still, where there's that effect as well, where if there's a charger that's physically in place, and months go by, well, somebody's already put it on PlugShare because the community is good about making sure that everybody knows it's there. But then you start to get those questions of like, well, why is this taking so long? What's going on? Where if the timeline were optimized, to your point, where, okay, that the transformer is going to be coming roughly in this timeline. So now you can focus the rest of that effort to not have it just sitting there for weeks and weeks and weeks. But the flip side of that, for a lot of smaller CPOs that maybe don't have a warehouse full of chargers waiting to be deployed. Well, if you can use your capital, even just put it into an account that's earning interest while you are waiting, if you know the right time to make the purchase so that it will get shipped and delivered right when you need it,
Yep.
you're able to work with the money you have in a much more efficient way. So that timing, it really has a ripple effect to so many other parts of
Yeah.
running a business and optimizing things. And I really like the point that you made that, especially for regional or smaller entities, having systems in place is very important, much more than I imagine a lot of entities will kind of just try to play it by ear and learn as they go. And
Yeah.
you got to have systems in order to set yourself up for success down the road as you get bigger.
100%. And that's what separates, the good from the great is, do you have that system that allows you to operate with consistency? Because you could go and run a great project and it would be amazing, but as you go,
What's
two
the next
towns
one?
over and it's not as optimal, right? And it's something that you struggled with. Well, did we learn from that? What were the inputs to, ultimately we're talking AI, right? What are the inputs to that data model that's going to allow you to make sure that you're not repeating that mistake down the line? Was it an interconnection problem? Was it a quality problem? Was it a subcontractor problem that we didn't necessarily understand? And when we go and we run into those issues, as you mentioned, where utility interconnection or we need, the substation upgrade or something like that is going to come into play, as soon as we understand that, can we plug that in to your schedule and have it essentially reforecast all the way down to say, well, you thought you were going to start construction, it's November 19th. You said we were going to start construction on December 1st. Well, based off of everything that we know, it's not until February. So go find another site that you could potentially not be sitting on inventory because you don't have the luxury to sit on inventory. And let's go optimize that for ultimately, the customer that you're serving or the network that you're trying to build.
Yeah, while inventory certainly might feel like the right way to go, inventory really is just unutilized capital. It's money
Yeah.
that's sitting there that is not providing the return on that investment.
Yep. Yep.
Like in many ways, the ideal scenario would be able to use technology in systems to not even have a warehouse where you're just deploying as needed and everything just lines up perfectly.
That would be beautiful.
Word that you had used was predictive analysis and or predictive analytics. And
Yeah.
so I want to really expand on that so that the audience can get a better grasp of really exactly, like, more detailed what that means.
Yeah. So essentially, you're feeding the beast, right? The system. There's information that's out there, and you're going to have tons of dimensions that are going to flow into that. So you're working with a specific utility. You're working within a specific city. You're working within, specific confines that are going to make up and represent what you will have to deal with in this project. When that comes into play, there is a standard. If we come in and say from NTP to in the ground is, let's call it 2 months, or that's probably a long 4 to 6 weeks. Well, because you put all of those in there, what the predictive analytics will allow you to do is essentially reforecast that work for you to understand, hey, with these inputs, based off of all the history that exists, this is actually going to take much longer. Or you might be able to optimize this because traditionally we've come in short on permitting because maybe this municipality turns them out really quickly. They're extremely pro EV and they say, let's go get them done. Few and far between, but
Yeah.
it's possible. Most of the time you're going to go in with that same reaction. Oh, yeah, probably not. But if we've been working there for long enough and we understand, the system understands that the reality is you can make this work a little bit faster, we want to understand that. And we want to be able to put that power into the hands of our customer to make those decisions. Ultimately, it's about decision making. It's about managing by exception. It's about allowing the system to point you and your eyes to the right direction, so you're not looking left when everything's pointing right. And that's extremely important because as we think about the deployment of anything, and even if as you're going into O&M, you're going to need some of that information to be proactive in keeping your uptime. If we understand that a charger goes down and it hits a warranty within a part at the 6 month mark, and you haven't quite manually figured that out, you want the system to come in and be able to alert you and say, hey, we're approaching a time where you might be at risk for 100 charge points. You need to get ahead of it. If not, you might have a problem on your hands in terms of uptime. Whether that's a warranty situation, whether that's just a recall situation, but you want to be able to get out there and be proactive and not wait for the knock to start fielding a ton of tickets saying your charger is down before you start acting, because then it becomes unmanageable.
And knock, for those who don't know, would be Network Operations Center. Basically, your call center combined with deploying assets or third-party contractors to fix whatever problems might be there. I know a lot of the times in the industry, we just roll with it. That's perfectly fine, Alex. So I like the idea of being able to use technology to prepare and be proactive versus reactive.
Yep.
A lot of the times when you're operating from a position of ignorance, you don't have the opportunity to be proactive. You can only be reactive to whatever might happen. Now, if you only have one or two chargers, or if you do have a warehouse with a lot of spare parts in it, you might be able to work with that okay, but certainly that's not ideal. And I don't think there's a CPO out there that I've ever interacted with that doesn't have ambitions to be a larger entity, right? They're not going, hey, we've got 10 chargers, we're happy with that, we're staying put. Like, everybody is looking to grow. So if you have 10 sites going online at the same time, well, all that warranty information and everything else is going to be essentially the same timeline for the equipment. Yeah, it's important to be prepared, and smaller networks might not have the staff that's monitoring things to stay ahead of it. So having technology and software provide those alerts will absolutely reduce the amount of time that it takes to respond to a situation when it ultimately eventually does happen, because that's inevitable. Things are going to break. How prepared are you for what breaks and how quickly you can respond to it?
Yeah. And one of the things that we're starting to see the shift at Sitetracker, at least within our customer base, is, over the course of the last 2 years, it was deploy, right? Let's get them all out there. They're going to be, young, right? We'll have our issues where we have general vandalism. We see it all the time. Somebody's going to go and cut something and mess with your charge point. Those are somewhat prepared for. It's corrective. Let's go back, deploy the crew, but we still deploy. Little bit of the shift that we're starting to see now is you now have to maintain that network that you've built. It's no longer have a network of 10 chargers, but we're starting to get into the 50s and the hundreds, and they've been out there for 2 years and 3 years. So how are these CPOs really shifting their mindset to still continue to put new charge points out, but also need to maintain the existing ones that aren't from, the accident that happens, but wear and tear and warranty and, all the other things, weather, whatever the case might be, they're more unpredictable things. So having that technology, that software to make sure that you are staying proactive still allows you to focus on your goals, which is to grow the network, but keeps you on the other side in making sure that we are taking the right steps to ensure that the ones that are in the ground aren't needing to be replaced in any way, shape, or form, or if they are, we're getting ahead of it. So to your point of that proactivity of doing those appropriate truck rolls and spreading them out over time, because you put 10 in the ground today, you don't want to maintain them all at the exact same time a year from now. So how are you spreading that out? How are you spreading that love, essentially, and ultimately building out those potential partnerships with O&M contractors to take care of those charge points in the ground? So there's a few things like that. There's also remote activities that you can do to ensure uptime. I was just talking to a customer last week where they were pretty shocked to find the majority of their issues were, I think it was something like 80+% of their issues were able to be solved just remotely. They reduced their truck rolls a ton because initially they were just sending crews out, go and fix it. And they, again, young company that was learning from their mistakes, if you will, and now are realizing, well, we can do a ton of remote diagnostics and be able to turn them back up and running pretty quickly. And it's the evolution of what we're seeing, and it's a lot of fun to witness, honestly.
Yeah, I'm seeing the evolution of technology on software and hardware side happening concurrently, right? Like
Yeah.
the early generations of equipment didn't have the ability to report to the detail of exactly what was wrong.
Yep.
It was just a general idea of, hey, there's an issue with the cord or the connector, maybe, where, now there's more sensors on equipment. There's
Yep.
and there's more information that's being accessed through the back end to look at, okay, well, what exactly caused that? Can we just turn it off and turn it back on, restart the equipment like all our
Old school.
computers, like, hey, have you turned it off and turned it back on again? Have you reset it? Okay. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of the software challenges
Yep.
can be solved remotely where, if you know that, then you can apply that knowledge in a way that can save you a ton of money and time,
Yep.
which of course then makes you more money because you're back up and running sooner.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things, in that conversation I was having was, I know for me, if I show up and it's down, unless I'm at zero, I'm just going to find the next one, right? You might not be getting that information if you don't have that technology to come in and alert you proactively to say, hey, the charger's down for X reason. Then you assume it's up, right? And you just assume that nobody's interfacing with it, while somebody like me just moved on to the next one. And I looked it up and said, where am I going next? I'll make it. I've got enough, and I'll go plug and play. I'm not necessarily scanning the barcode, calling the number, sending the text, and opening up a ticket to say, hey, something's wrong with this. So you inadvertently end up with a situation where now you've got an uptime situation, but also a reputation situation.
Oh, sure.
And a revenue situation, because you didn't even know it was down. You just thought you weren't collecting revenue. The fact is, people are driving by it, realizing, oh, it's not working, and off I go.
Yeah, I have a feeling that'll become much more common as the number of sites increases.
Yeah.
Because if you, like right now, the chances of having another fast charger comparable within a couple miles, depending on where you are in the country. I mean, obviously, certain areas are better than others, but that is not going to be extremely common. Where 5-10 years from now, I mean, it's hard to predict, but it's probably a safe assumption to go, there's going to be a lot more.
Yeah.
Coming.
Yeah, my fingers are crossed that there are a lot more coming.
I just was on a trip with a Tesla, of all things, this past weekend, and found a situation where I wished there would have been a supercharger site closer to the highway, where I didn't like the fact that I had to go out of my way because that was the only one that was available. I'm going, like almost to the point where I think if we start doing more of that, I'll get the adapter to be able to use CCS. And I know Tesla owners are probably screaming through the computer right now going, what? But like, there's still a need, a dramatic need. And Virginia isn't really behind like a lot of states are. But there's still so much that needs to be done. So we'll see. But yeah, I think it's probably safe to say we're going to have a lot more connectors available. And if yours is broken, okay, I'm moving on. Like, I'm not going to take the time and it's not even a courtesy thing. It's just, that's not the way humans are, where we'd rather not even deal with the hassle. I've got my own things to worry about. I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you said, it's human nature. It's human nature. Just move on to the next thing, right? Instant gratification. I'm not necessarily being the nice guy and going in reporting in that every single charger I go to is down. So it's kind of back to the original point. Having the ability to move quickly and protect your assets in the ground is is the next stage of importance for, I mean, a lot of CPOs are already doing it, but it's that next wave where now we need to consider it's not just volume of deployment, but how are we keeping everything up and running? And I think we're going to see, those O&M partners are going to start coming out. You're going to start seeing people diversifying the skill sets are out there, right? The labor is out there. It's just folks aren't necessarily focused within EV charging. And we're starting to see a little bit of that crossover now, even amongst Sitetracker customers that service outside of EV. They're seeing the opportunity and being able to make the crossover and really expand their business and expand their portfolio of who they service.
And especially for fuel providers to retain and guarantee that their business will exist 15, 20 years from now. That's definitely something that's on their minds. When you're looking at the evolution of technology, especially with AI, because that is just, if we think the EV space is moving quick, oh my goodness, like AI every day, it's something new. What is something that you have an expectation of that's coming down the road that really gets you excited?
That's a good question. I'm looking forward to, specifically within the EV CPO customer base that we work with, is to use that to essentially streamline and create essentially up the quality that exists, right? So AI right now, we're thinking image recognition, think quality audits that are happening. As we scale, we're not going to be able to, look at every nook and cranny of everything that we're deploying. So, making sure that you have technology that can come in and validate whether or not something is done correctly is going to be a big component of that. So that's one thing that we're working on, is making sure that we have just general QA issue detections, quality on the photos that are coming in for your handover packages. We want to make sure that what we're taking a picture of or it has been set up correctly, the ground is level. All these small tidbit things that typically you need somebody out there to go and do, that's going to slow things down. And ultimately, what it's going to do is speed it up. And that is also going to be a huge factor in the ability for us to scale a massive network of EV chargers, right? Like we've got these hubs. They're needed, as you mentioned, 5 years from now. They're going to be spread out throughout all of the U.S. Well, we're going to rely on technology to make sure that that's being done in a correct way. Just throwing manpower at it is not the only solution. So that, to me, is something that I'm excited about, seeing that change. We're already seeing folks using drones for image recognition, for site selection, which is really cool. Where typically you needed to have somebody out there. Well, now we have whole companies that are, providing drone services that can go fly up, give you a scan of it, and you can go and do all of the terrain and understand what's going on and make your decisions faster and ultimately be able to build a network faster. So there's a lot of these subcomponents and sub industries that are starting to get created, with that technology is a massive part of it all.
Sure. And I'm sure for especially a startup CPO, that cost and deployment of capital is so very important. And I have nothing against wonderful people who do great work, but I fully support using technology, whether it's AI or not, to remove the human from the equation as much as possible for two reasons. One, we can speed things up, be much more efficient. But secondly, humans cost a lot of money. Technology costs a lot of money, but humans being involved costs so much more. And if we can make that more efficient, well, for a smaller company especially, now you can apply the capital in a way that's going to provide results and actually have a return on the investment, which not only, of course, is best for your company, but also can benefit society as a whole, the end user, because now you're back up and running much more quickly, or the site's in the ground sooner and is being able to be operated sooner. it really just the ball rolls downhill, right? Like every single part of the process is better because that was an option. And maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but over time, those even small differences of cost add up.
The pennies 100% add up, and they're adding up now. Like the end of the day, technology and mobile app, let's call it, is not pouring concrete into the ground. This is not happening, right? So we understand that, but and using just some of the things that I've witnessed over the course of the last few weeks is the ability to get information from the field to the back office and do it quickly and efficiently is going to allow you to invoice faster. It's going to allow a company to move faster. It's going to allow to reduce those handover days, because at the end of the day, you go from site selection to a permitting team to a pre-construction team to a construction team, post, etc., all the way down. Those handoffs right now, you're losing 2, 3, 4, 5 days, weeks at a time in those handoffs. Well, if we have that information, we're using the system appropriately, you will reduce all of that.
Yeah.
And particularly the field to the back office. I have a very specific use case in my mind where they would send crews out 2 weeks at a time. At the return of those 2 weeks, they come into the office and they fill out, essentially do all of their data entry, right? From their pen and paper, their JSAs, their pictures, all of the above, get them in a system. This is, pre-Sitetracker.
Mm-hmm.
Then you come in now and you provide them with the ability to do it almost instantaneously. Well, their time went from a 2-week lag because of, day one from when they went out into day 14 where they came into now they're turning things around within their company within a day, because the information is just making its way back and it's happening live, and it's reducing all of the truck rolls, because now those crews that have been deployed, now you don't have to get redeployed. You go, you make sure that you've got everything done, the quality is there, you have the technology that allows you to make some of those checks, or at least give you the warning, like, hey, verify this, make sure that it's done the right way, send a message to your manager, have them confirm before you leave, allows them to go home, spend more time with their family, spend more time outside of the administrative stuff, which we all know field crews do not love. And how can we facilitate that and make their lives easier ultimately is going to help play a big role into that. So all of those, the pennies, they definitely add up. And if you take that over the course of a network, over multiple states, over all of the above, all of those dimensions that come into play, it's going to make a big difference for somebody that's attempting to scale, or if they already have the scale, in attempting to make it more efficient. And ultimately, they become they become very valuable.
Yeah, the communication from CPOs to the general public, I've seen that start to shift. It hasn't quite gotten there yet, but the big metric that CPOs would tout as like, what makes us great? Oh, well, it was always how many charge points they had installed in the ground.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to see that conversation shift to include, but then sometimes only talk about uptime, where being able to say, yeah, we have our equipment running, available to be used 99 point whatever percent of the time. That is a metric that I think people are becoming more aware of, and therefore placing more importance on it, which can get a little frustrating because, of course, uptime for level 2 and uptime for DC fast, very different pieces of equipment. And if you're a charge network that does level 2 80-90% of your equipment, and you're going and saying, oh, well, our uptime's 99 point whatever percent, comparing to, let's say, EVgo or Electrify America or some of these others where it's mostly DC fast.
Yep.
Like, if we're touting these amazing uptime numbers, but we're not specifically sharing that nuanced detail, I think it's a little ingenuous. But I'm happy that the conversation's going there, because that has been a massive frustration for the average EV owner, is not having that confidence where when you pull in and you plug the connector to your car, it's going to work.
Yep.
So we need the conversation going there. And I think utilizing technology, AI systems to really have a focus on being proactive, that can only help.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's great.
And it's funny that you mentioned this because it is that evolution as I was mentioning, and we're still early in the days of EV. We're still in that chicken egg. Well, you need the network to sell the car for somebody to want to buy the car, but we need folks to buy the cars, the non-early adopters that are super passionate about it, to go and buy the car to justify the network. And I think we're past the justification of the cars to build a network. People are going for it anyway. But to your point of the non-early adopter, when you went in and you were buying, your first Tesla, you knew that there might be some hiccups as you were going around, right? And if you were an early adopter, you were taking on that risk. Well, now it's everyday folks are starting to make that decision and come in, well, I need a new car. Is this the right move for me? And the first question that they ask, and I have this conversation with my friends all the time because they know I'm involved in the industry, is, well, if I get it, am I going to be able to charge my car if I leave? Do I still need a traditional, ICE that's gonna for family road trips? Do I still need that SUV? Or can I take it? I'm in New Jersey. Can I take it from New Jersey down to Florida and I'm gonna be okay? So that is the main question that is popping up now for, again, that everyday user that's making the evaluation of should I take the plunge or not, is what's that uptime really look like? The one thing that you mentioned that is interesting, because in my friend conversations, they don't think about that, is level 2 versus a DC fast.
Oh, yeah. It's all
and
the same.
Understanding that the DC fast is probably what they care about for the question that they're asking.
Right.
So the education is still getting there. It's just probably one level away.
Yeah. Well, yes and no. Right. So I've been doing a lot of thinking about generally who will be buying EVs, who is making that transition.
Yeah.
And we're getting to a point where I truly believe people don't care to know. They don't care to know the difference. They don't want to learn. They just want to use it and have it work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is quite the challenge because it puts on the industry the thought to go, all right, well, how are we going to prepare for the masses that they're used to rolling up, paying, putting the pump into the filler, and it just works. They don't have to think about it. I mean, yeah, we've taught them that there's a difference between 87, 91, and 93 octane. Most people get that. Some don't, but most do. So yes, there is a little bit that needs to be learned along the way, but I think people aren't going to be proactive on their own to really learn that. I was in a local dealership in Central Virginia here in Williamsburg this past week, and having a conversation with one of the managers, and a guy comes up very upset, like very animated. I'll put it that way. And he said, I'm having a charging emergency. And so naturally, I'm just standing there because I don't work there. I'm like, all right, let's see where this goes. And he explains that he's in a rental. It's a Nissan Leaf. He's trying to get charged. He's like 0% on the battery.
Okay.
And the charger out front was both CCS, dual connectors, wasn't CHAdeMO. And so he's like, no idea what to do, how to do it. Well, this dealership, they are a little bit further ahead in the adoption curve where, yes, they actually have a fast charger up front for public use, which is awesome.
Okay. Nice.
But the person that this guy was talking to, that I was having a conversation with, isn't somebody that is necessarily knows so much about EVs, and they're not a Nissan dealership, so he didn't know the car or what it's capable of or anything. So there is that education component on both sides.
Yeah.
And so I ended up having to pull up ChargeWay, the app that will show where, based on the car, where the charging is. And so I showed this guy. I'm like, look, I don't know how much time you have, but here's a level 2. It's less than a mile away. You'll probably want to go there, plug in for 10, 15 minutes just to get some more miles. And here's the next closest Chatamo plug, which is what you need to look for. So we're going to have, I think, situations fairly commonly where people, because of the ignorance, the masses, are going to run into unfavorable situations that, as an industry, we have to expect that to happen and be proactive and be prepared for people to be upset about something that maybe it's not in our control, but we need to be able to respond in a way that can help them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be like any new mass adopting scenario, right? You're going to have folks where, in this case, a rental said, hey, that's a good idea, doesn't exactly think it through, potentially decided on that rental as a data point for a future purchase. And now is that person feeling educated? And now I understand what I need to do for confirming that purchase, or are completely turned off? And that was scary. And I didn't know what to do, needed a ton of help, had to go somewhere else. And ultimately, I'll pause until my next car purchase. So it's going to be a slow roll. It is moving very, very positively at this point. You know, I listened to the EVgo earnings. I think it was 2 weeks ago now. It was just amazing to hear. Like, it was so exciting to hear what that growth was year over year, the subscriptions year over year. It's very encouraging for the market. It's very encouraging for ultimately the future of what EV charging holds. And Sitetracker is a global company that's seeing that evolution happen outside of the US as well. It's fun. It's fun. And it's exciting. It's energizing. So.
It's important for it to be fun. But if it's not fun, if it's not something that is enjoyable, then it has to be important. And the passion for making a difference, like that, whatever drives you has to be there, even on days where it's not fun, honestly, especially on days where it's not fun. So Alex, I know we're coming up on time, so I want to ask you my traditional last 2 questions that I ask my guests. The first is about you, and it's very simply just, what vehicle do you drive?
So, great question. I'm in the market for an EV. So the last vehicle I've purchased was done in 2017, and it is a Toyota RAV4, traditional SUV, family car. And I have my first ever car, which is a Toyota Corolla from 2006. So those are my 2 cars. I do not have an EV yet. I'm almost 100% sure it will be an EV once the wheels fall off of my poor little Toyota Corolla. Was actually talking to my wife about a Rivian, which that's like, that's the goal, because I think they're so pretty. I think they're so nice. But ultimately we'll probably end up being an EV that is a little bit more within the price realm instead of a Rivian. But so those are the cars that I drive. And looking to do the next purchase will almost certainly be an EV.
Well, if you're looking for a used EV, I've got some connections I'm happy to point you to that will ship anywhere. So
I like that.
They'll do good. They'll do good.
That's cool.
I'll make sure to connect you. Now, the second question, and this is the last one, it touches back to that passion, that purpose, where I love it because it's a play on the word drives. So instead of what do you drive, what drives you? What is that that motivation when you wake up in the morning, that even on the days that aren't fun, what really keeps you going?
So for me, being within a Sitetracker seat, responsible for the customers that are doing this work, I have been lucky enough to witness the evolution both here in the US and, in Europe and APAC. I've been working with EV customers since about 2017. And that was early, right? It was a lot of mistakes were being made.
Yeah.
We didn't have a lot of regional CPOs. Seeing that growth has, it drives me, right? To use your question, drives me to keep showing up every day for those customers to help them get better. And that's something that I preach to my team. It's something that Sitetracker preaches, is we're here to really provide the next level for critical infrastructure. And I really feel that we're on the cusp of the next era that exists across renewable energy, green energy, and just, essentially taking care of the planet, for lack of a better word. And that's what fuels me in that sense. So that excitement and seeing that evolution, seeing what's on the horizon, because if it was trickling down, maybe this answer is a little bit different. But name the cliche. We're the tip of the iceberg. We're at the beginning. Hockey stick up and to the right. You name the cliche that you want to, or the analogy you want to give. But that's what I feel and what I'm witnessing globally. And it's even the days that are not fun. You consume this information and you're part of these networks and you're part of these conversations that the trajectory is something very difficult to not get excited about.
Very true. Very true. Even on the toughest of days, when you step back and look at, I guess the way I would put it, to me, it's such a joy and pleasure, but really an honor to have a small role to play in the larger picture, to know that I am a part of that something bigger, that I'm helping with this.
Yeah.
And I know that's something that's shared with a lot of people that are in the industry, that it's like, we feel blessed just to even be a part of it.
Yeah. And it's real. That's very real. So you said that, I can double stamp it. It really is something. It's exciting to talk about. It's exciting to talk about with my friends and my family. It's making an impact, and it's making an impact on people that I know. It's real world impact. And yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Well, Alex, I can't think of a better way or a better high note to end on. So if people want to follow along with Sitetracker specifically and follow the work that you all are doing, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so Sitetracker LinkedIn. I'm plenty active on there. I'm constantly sharing stories of the work that we're doing with our customers. I just came back from a great Spain trip and discussing with the CPOs out in Madrid. So that was a heck of a good time. And yeah, that's going to be, sitetracker.com. If you're interested in learning more about what we do and how we can help service you and the assets that you have in the ground. We're here, like I mentioned at the onset, we're here from A to Z, site selection through construction, through O&M. We do it all. And we're becoming the market leader in here, and it's very, very exciting. And I'm looking forward to working with anybody. If you want to reach out to me, you know where to find me.
Well, Alex, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast, and I want to thank you for your time and the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. Thanks, Zach. And thanks for the work that you're doing too. This is an awesome resource for everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I mean, it's in the name.
Yeah, it is. It is. I love it.
I really hope you've enjoyed this podcast and want to thank you so much for being here. If you haven't left a review or rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I'd really appreciate it. And if you have any feedback for the show, questions for me, or just want to reach out and say hi, you can email me at hello@ev-resource.com. The EV Resource Podcast is a production of EvoSpark Media Group and is supported by viewers and listeners just like you. Supporters of EV Resource on Patreon include, at the director tier, Rajeev, Narayan, and Andy Cooper. At the executive producer tier, Christopher Lawrence and Dave Laansma, and at the producer tier, Eric Weber and Tony Stuntz. To get ad-free episodes of the podcast, free EV Resource merchandise, support recognition, and to join in the community discussion, you can head over to patreon.com/EV Resource. I've been your host, Zach Hurst. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I'll catch you next time.